And it's beyond generative AI, like helping me with emails or to create show notes for the podcast. It really is now like, how can I use AI to improve my website? How can I use AI to give me feedback as to growing my audience on certain social media channels? But in the healthcare clinical environment, there's so many AI tools, and governance is a big word that comes up because there's not a lot of governance. Everybody knows we need to integrate AI, we need to integrate AI, we need to integrate AI. And often it's just haphazard and it's a lot of spaghetti thrown at the wall. And the governance part is important in terms of safety, patient safety, but also clinician safety. In the emergency department, it's being used a lot in terms of scribes and ambient scribes. And we're seeing a lot of that literature, or as I like to say, literature come out about really is it making physicians more efficient? Is it decreasing time? Is it helping burnout? Because the thought is that AI should be a value add, not one more thing on the plate to take care of with the electronic health record.
Welcome to No Filter Doctor, where we cut through the health hype, dig into what's real, what works, and what's backed by evidence. I'm your host, Dr. AK. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I am super excited about the topic this week. We are going to talk about using AI to get healthy. And what's even more exciting is that I have a guest with me today. I have Dr. Resa E. Lewis, who is an adjunct professor of emergency medicine at Brown. She also happens to be a double board certified physician in emergency medicine and lifestyle medicine. Sound familiar? It should. Risa, why don't you take it away and tell everyone about yourself a little bit more?
AK, thank you so much for the invitation to join you on an episode of your podcast. Yeah, we have a Venn diagram overlap of interests: emergency medicine, lifestyle medicine, effective medical education, podcasting, AI. Essentially, there's a lifelong commitment to trying to help people be healthier.
It's so great to have you on here. I just have to share this little anecdote. So, for many of you who don't know, and I'm sure you have no idea, when I graduated residency, I was the director of emergency ultrasonography in my department. And it was kind of crazy because I just finished residency and boom, now I have this title and this thing to do. Well, I got this email about participating in writing something that was related to emergency medicine ultrasonography. And Dr. Lewis here was the head of the project and was like my idol because she was the goddess of everything emergency medicine and ultrasonography. And now she's a great friend where we have all these shared interests. And I cannot be more thrilled to have you on here with me today.
It's great to be in conversation, and I love the topic with which you led.
Yeah, this is something that's kind of close to your heart. You also have a podcast. You want to share a little bit about that and what you discuss on your podcast?
Sure. So the name of my podcast is the Visible Voices Podcast. It was a pandemic passion project. I really had that feeling, as many of us in medicine did, of, what's something I can do. It launched in March of 2020. I cover the topics of healthcare, equity, and innovation. It's an interview style podcast, but really seeking to help educate the audience, usually centered on health. And when I don't center on health, people get very confused. But that's when I explain that I'm totally a liberal arts nerd.
Well, you've had quite a few episodes where you've talked about AI and AI in healthcare. What has been your experience with this emergence of AI and our health?
I think about it a lot. And every day, like you, I wake up and think, how can I push my own learning further in terms of AI and healthcare? And it's beyond generative AI, like helping me with emails or to create show notes for the podcast. It really is now like, how can I use AI to improve my website? How can I use AI to give me feedback as to growing my audience on certain social media channels? But in the healthcare clinical environment, there's so many AI tools, and governance is a big word that comes up because there's not a lot of governance. Everybody knows we need to integrate AI, we need to integrate AI, and often it's just haphazard and it's a lot of spaghetti thrown at the wall. And the governance part is important in terms of safety, patient safety, but also clinician safety. In the emergency department, it's being used a lot in terms of scribes and ambient scribes. And we're seeing a lot of that literature, or as I like to say, literature come out uh, about really is it making physicians more efficient? Is it decreasing time? Is it helping burnout? Because the thought is that AI should be a value add, not one more thing on the plate to take care of with the electronic health record.
I wholeheartedly agree. I also use AI in the generative way that you brought up, but I do also use it as an adjunct to help my patients when it comes to planning of their health. But I do have a lot of conversations with them that you can't just go into it blindly. You have to have some kind of framework and some kind of education. And a lot of them don't realize that. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that AI is an expert when it's not. It is a tool and it is only as good as what it can access out on the internet. So, you know this. I really pride myself by being this one voice that people can come to for the quote truths that you can find out there on social media and the internet. And so AI is looking at those same things. So you can still get the misinformation, but in an AI platform. And so that's what I thought we could talk about today is how we can help patients and individuals who maybe don't know everything they need to know about these AI platforms. Like, what are they? What are the tools that you need to have going into it? And then how it can be used in an effective way to help model some of your dietary help that you need, or maybe some exercise physiology. So I'm really excited to talk about that with you. I think one of the first things is really there are so many platforms that are out there. Do you have any insights on kind of what are your faves and what you like to use for what?
First, I'll say, in terms of disclaimers, and you've spoken about the importance of looking at disclaimers. I have no conflicts. I have no disclaimers. I don't have any professional relationships or personal relationships with any of these companies. I read daily newsletters, at least two, sometimes three, because some are daily newsletters, some are weekly newsletters, to help me keep aware of all the different platforms there are. And there's some platforms that I would say are more trusted in healthcare, and some are not as trusted or not as commonly used. And though that's when I'm usually using them for generative purposes. And so the topic that we're talking about today actually is both. It's both healthcare and generative. So I think a general catchphrase that I would suggest everybody use, and I always type this into my prompts, do not hallucinate. And the reason I bring that up is one of the ways that I learned about how AI can sort of make things up is I was looking for a point of care ultrasound article. And I specifically wanted to see if any research had been done since the last time I checked on something specific to ultrasound. And they said yes. And it actually gave me these three articles. I was like, that's amazing. I had no idea about these publications. I went to try to find them in PubMed. I couldn't find them.
No, you could
And
not.
that's when I understood and my real-time example of the quote hallucinate. So for all of you listening, always type in or say if you use like a program like Whisper, WHISPR, which again, no affiliation, but I love it, but it allows you to basically dictate what you want to write or type. I always say, do not hallucinate, search the internet for accurate information. And it really has increased the accuracy and the effectiveness of what comes back to me from AI.
Yeah, you know what I've also found really interesting? So ChatGPT is a common one. It's an OpenAI product. ChatGPT is not a real time, up to date searcher of the internet. So sometimes when you want the most up to date information, you actually have to use Gemini, which taps into Google. And so Gemini will do those live searches. ChatGPT does your general information searches and things like that. I've used Claude to help me a little bit with copy editing. As you know, I put this blog out and it's just me. I'm a one woman show. So I will get all of the information I need and put it all into a blog. And then I'll ask Claude for some assistance with copy editing. And for those people who are really facile with the Microsoft products, they use the Copilot, which you can also use as AI. So there really are a ton of different platforms. The healthcare one that I probably lean into a lot, which is also prone to hallucination, is actually open evidence. It's one that I think a lot of physicians use, but you could type in there about hormone replacement therapy. I did it like 2 months ago. I had a question and I wanted a paper to come up, and it would not give me any of the up to date literature. It's still stuck on the Women's Health Initiative data from 2002. So you really have to be careful.
And to answer your question, I use Claude, and that came after speaking with friends that are much more in the AI and tech industry. But they said, use them all and see which ones, because certain platforms are effective for different means, which goes back to what you were saying about OpenAI. Doximity now has a platform. Up to Date has a platform. Helio has a platform. And actually, that is a disclosure. I write for Helio, but all of these communities, all of these information sources are jumping on and having their AI tools for the exact reasons of, I think, keeping up with what's happening in healthcare, but also to be able to generate accurate outputs for their users.
And this is one of the things that I think I really stress with a lot of my patients is AI is not the expert. You will get hallucinations. And that is why you want to go to the experts first. We used to joke all the time about Dr. Google. You would Google some kind of finding and you would find all of these terrible things that come up on the internet. I mean, you in your emergency medicine experience, I know you can relate to this. How many patients have we seen? They do a Google search for pain in their ankle and somehow it landed on you have a blood clot in your lungs and you're about to die. And then people come running into the emergency department, understandably so, because they're terrified. But I think it's really important that people understand expert opinion, that knowledge, that training, that has to come first whenever you are leaning into any AI platform. I brought up open evidence as an example. I know the contents and the literature and the topic and was able to recognize that there is an error here. This is not the correct information. And when you don't have that expertise and you're not turning to that expertise, I think that's when AI can be a harmful tool when it comes to anything related to healthcare. What do you think about that?
I love what you shared. And to dovetail off that, I think what you're highlighting is like quality in, quality out, crap in, crap out. And that also introduces this concept of bias. And I spoke with a guest on my podcast about JAMA plus AI, that publication as a part of the JAMA Journal series. And he was saying that a lot of AI, when it's using large data sets, it's coming from electronic health record. And it's coming from, the biased data that's been recorded and that's been filtered over decades. And we know, for example, women were not included in NIH research until the 1990s. And pregnant women, for example, are often excluded. So just to talk about certain communities that aren't included in the science, and therefore when AI is basically giving us an answer to a question, it's inheriting the bias of the sources that it's scraping. And so bias is something that we have to be aware of. And there's been a lot out on the bias in terms of marginalized communities, in terms of racism, in terms of misogyny. And again, it's the people programming and it's people inputting, and that's affecting what is output.
What are your thoughts on the prompts? Do you have any particular prompting framework? I use the RTCO, but I don't know if that's the best one. What are your thoughts on that?
So I have not subscribed to a specific framework. I do definitely, I'm always collecting good prompts. And what I've found, and one of the reasons why I read about this actively, is the more I read about it and the more I try prompts, the better I get at them.
I need the concrete steps, if you will. My attention gets diverted all over the place. So, for what I typically do is I will put role and then say exactly what I want the role to be. So, for my patient, I work with them on this and I say, if this is a nutrition thing, the role is a registered dietitian who specializes in metabolic health, specifically insulin resistance, with 20 years of expertise. And I have found that when you do that, it at least takes the platform and it makes it kind of narrowed down into one body of literature rather than it pool from everything. It knows, okay, what papers are coming from the dietary journals, what's the data out there from different guidelines. And that helps kind of focus where this is even looking in terms of its data that it's providing. Similarly with the task, I find that has to be really specific. I need a 7-day meal plan that includes breakfast, lunch, and dinner and 2 snacks with these limitations. What are your daily calories? What are the macros that you're trying to get? What foods do you not like? I mean, some people are just not feeling onions, right? So it needs to know these things. And then I add that into the context as well. You kind of expand on that. And then the output very clearly, I want a list, or I want an Excel file, or I want a PDF, or just put it in the chat. I find when you're really specific with that, it helps. And I'm all in. At the very end, I say, what questions do you have to complete this task with a 95% confidence? And I feel like you have to say that because AI is very overly confident. It will say completely wrong things with 100% confidence. And it's so convincing.
Everything you shared, I'm on the same page. And that level of organization and prescription, it's very prescriptive, is a really intelligent approach to get reliable output each time.
Do you have any other things that you do in terms of your inputs and your requested outputs?
As you shared that, what I thought was the cadence of going back to the prompt, you can always go back and ask again. Like in the emergency department, if you forgot to ask the patient a question, you could always go back and ask them or ask them again to sort of double down and make sure truly you have a clear picture of their story or that you're remembering them correctly as opposed to confusing them with a different patient. So I think what I always keep in mind is if I forget anything, I always like, and this, and this, and this. What I also find is if I've gotten an output that I think has been particularly helpful and clear and sort of reads the way I think, then I will actually say, reference this as an example and give me, in the case of an output, output that looks like this.
Something else that I've tried, I wonder if you've tried this at all. I've actually gone into, say, Gemini, and I've been like, I want to use ChatGPT to do X, Y, and Z. Here's all the things that I want. What are the inputs that I need to put into ChatGPT to get what I want? Have you done that before? Kind of used one to get help from another?
So this is exactly what my friend who's in this world has suggested to me. I haven't done it, but she has suggested doing that, seeing which output you like better or how to improve the output. I recently did a deep dive into primary care and primary care physicians. I was working on an article and many people our age, but also what I found is our parents' age, are struggling to find a primary care doctor or they need a primary care doctor. And it turns out we are hemorrhaging primary care physicians in this country, and the match is down as well. And so I was creating prompts. I used AI to help me generate prompts that lay people, the general population, can use to locate primary care physician options, health centers in their area, but also how to screen someone that would be a good fit. What questions to ask. The things that we may know to ask or think of asking, many people outside of healthcare may not. So I was able to generate, I think, about 15 really clear prompts. And there's no one way to do it. There are many prompts that could work, but using AI prompts to develop prompts, like it can help. The generative AI can generate prompts to help you find things like a primary care doctor.
That's really interesting. Did you share that in your research with other people?
It was in the article. It was like a prescriptive nonfiction piece talking about how people come to the emergency department often because they don't have a primary care physician, or even if they have someone on the back of the card, they've never met that person. And we have to explain to them, well, that means you kind of don't have someone unless you've met them and had that first appointment. And they are being discharged from the emergency department. And they say, can I follow up with you as a primary care doctor? Obviously it's the hugest compliment, but then we explain what many of us don't have primary care practices outside of our emergency department experience, but it's great on discharge instructions.
Yeah. I have a question for you. I read or was reading, and I'm not exactly sure where the source was, but I was reading something about how after the first few back and forths that you have with AI, that it tends to get lost and distracted. Because one of the things that you brought up, which made me think of this, you talked about how, in the emergency department, you go, you see someone, you ask them whatever, you sit down, you start doing your charting, and you're like, oh, I forgot. And then you run back in and you ask another question. My understanding was that when you keep adding to the chat, whatever chat is that's open on whatever platform, the more of these back and forth exchanges you have, the less reliable the output of the platform is. Have you heard anything along that? It was something about generational responses, I think is what I was reading.
I have not read that. I'd be interested to learn if that is true. And I haven't seen that spoken about specifically in the newsletters I've been following. What I found in my own experience is if I switch topics without letting the AI know that I've switched topics, it stays on the original thread. But I have even like, I recently was doing an audit and a plan of one of my social media channels, and it was following along for days. I would pick up and, go back, or it would do a timeout if I had the free version rather than the paid version. It's really interesting to see how these platforms try to get you to pay. And that's also another time that I've been advised to just switch to a different platform.
As much as we are using I think it's really important to talk about the other downsides of it as well. What is going on with all of this information out there about AI and the environmental impact?
So I would never claim to be an expert on this. I can just say that I hear it on like the general news programs and even some of the political programs that are talking about costs and the economy and where's money going and how's the stock market doing, and the resistance in terms of certain parts of the country wanting these data centers to be built. So I kind of just have gotten a light overbrush. I don't know the deep dive, but I've heard both sides of the argument about whether it really is environmentally not a good idea versus does it really stand out more than other environmental factors that are doing damage.
There was a paper that came out about generative AI. Bashir, I think, was the author, and it was in 2024. I cannot for the life of me remember the journal. They talked about the impact and sustainability of AI. And one of the things that the article mentioned was that some of these AI companies have been approached about their carbon footprint, but it didn't really go into details of what that meant. So I do often find myself, do you really want to use AI to find out who won the football game or the baseball game? Or do you want to really use it with something much more targeted and focused? So I do tend to lean into it as an assistant with things in terms of workflow. And I try and be lean in my use of AI, but it's hard because it's there, it's accessible, and it's really helpful.
I think it's important. I don't have the deep dive knowledge to give a clear answer, and I can't quote the literature on it. But what I'll say is it reminds me a bit of people who are opting to not fly as often because of
Mm.
the carbon footprint.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. I've also read a couple things about the ability to use your brain, to put it very mildly, with this use of AI. It's funny. So, my children are in middle school and they are forbidden of using AI in any way, shape, or form, which I half agree with. I think they should be taught how to use AI as a tool, but there are a lot of restrictions and limitations and issues with using AI. And one of the main concerns is, well, if you're just using this program to figure everything out for you, how are you then going to use your own brain and be able to critically think? What are your thoughts on that?
So this, for me, overlaps with this whole argument in AI of de-skilling. And vis-a-vis middle school, elementary school, what I've consistently heard is that kids need to learn how to read, kids need to learn how to write, kids need to learn how to do arithmetic before then they use AI as tools. So in healthcare, there's a lot of discussion about, will AI take away skills, de-skill? Whether it's procedural skills, whether it's computational skills, whether it's creating a cogent H&P, history and physical. And I recently had a conversation with another podcast guest, and we were talking about this with AI scribes and the wireless stethoscope? And are we going to lose our ability to hear and listen for heart sounds as well as lung sounds? When I was speaking with this guest, he was saying that we should worry less about de-skilling and more about reskilling ourselves as healthcare professionals to learn how to use these AI tools. But what that presupposes is that we learned the original skill to begin with. And so this goes back to the same thing about learning the old school way first and then adding in the AI. I don't know necessarily that I'm feeling strongly in that way and arguing that, but what I'm saying is the worry that we're seeing about the de-skilling, I think the same thing happened when robotic surgery happened. The same thing happened with point of care ultrasound. There's so many analogous situations that I think, when the World Wide Web came in, everybody's like, everybody's going to stop learning how to write and stop learning how to read. And that this is just another wave that is sort of the wave of right now.
Did everyone say that or just the people selling Encyclopedia Britannica? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. There's always gonna be a case scenario. Every era, there's something. I was gonna say with the World Wide Web, there was concern that all these jobs were gonna go away, and all these jobs didn't go away. Jobs changed, people had to pivot. Where the jobs were taken, new jobs were created because of the World Wide Web. The articles I've read, the arguments I've heard are that AI is gonna, take away certain jobs and positions, but there's gonna be a pivoting. The one thing I've heard consistently is that jobs that require less education and training, those jobs are going to be taken away. And so that's sort of making sure that just like the communities with determinants of health, the communities with determinants of education and access to job opportunities, making sure that that community, that group of people doesn't get left behind and affected.
That's really interesting. I've had similar discussions. My husband's a teacher. We have two young boys, and we're always talking about what jobs should they do, unless you're going to do a labor skill like a trade. I don't know that there's really any job that's going to be untouched by AI, right? I don't anticipate a robot is going to come into your house and fix plumbing. So I feel like the trades are often protected, but a lot of the other jobs, it is kind of figuring out how AI is going to be incorporated into that role. Any last thoughts about AI and how we're using it in healthcare?
Just that I am really glad you brought this to your show. I think it's a really important topic. I think that as physicians and other healthcare professionals, we need to be reading and having these conversations on a regular basis so that you start speaking the language and you learn the terminology and you become comfortable with using it and integrating it, because it's not if, it's when, and the when already happened. Everybody thinks this is like the first era of AI, but this is actually the third wave. It's been here. We're just now seeing it much more blatantly. But for physicians, it's been there in a static form with the EKG reading that comes out. Like
Yeah.
it's been there in a static form. If you didn't realize it, the fact that your phone can recognize your face, that's all AI.
I think bottom line, whether you're a patient or someone working in the healthcare industry, it's really important to recognize that AI is a tool. This is something to assist us. AI is not an expert. AI will lie to you with the biggest smile on its face because it doesn't know any better. It is just taking the information that it has access to. And I think, especially for patients, it's really important to realize that when it comes to healthcare, you need expert input to help with those prompts and those tools and the roles and everything that you're putting in to make sure that the output that you're getting out is something that is accurate and is actually going to be helpful rather than be worrisome and maybe cause a little bit of harm.
Yeah. And what I'll say for the healthcare professionals, the doctors listening, at this point, we're liable. We are responsible for what AI puts out. In other words, like you need to read those notes. If AI is assisting you, if there's a tool in your work environment, it can assist you, it should assist you, it will assist you. But ultimately, we are, as the physicians, still liable. So pay attention. And just a caveat to what you shared about the lying and the hallucinations, I think that AI is going to continue to evolve to actually be better, be more accurate, be more reliable. But where we are right now is where we are in terms of not being 100% clear that everything that comes out is right and accurate and something on which we should put our true confidence and trust.
Dr. Lewis, thank you so much for taking the time to go through this topic today. I love seeing you.
Great to see you. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak.
For everyone else, I will talk to you next week. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on this week's No Filter Doctor. If you enjoyed the content, you can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also go to www.thewholehumanhealthandwellbeing.com and sign up for the weekly newsletter, where you will get a link to the blog, that week's podcast, and a health tip of the week sent directly to you. It's important to know that while I am a doctor, I'm not your doctor. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and it's not intended as medical advice. Listening to this podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. The information discussed should not be used to diagnose, treat, or prevent any medical condition, nor should it replace individualized medical care. If you have questions or concerns about your health, please contact your own healthcare provider. Any decisions to delay or forego a medical evaluation or treatment based on the information discussed in this podcast are made so at your own risk. My only financial disclosure is my medical practice, The Whole Human Health and Wellbeing. Take care, and I'll talk to you next week.